I have two friends with me today because, as you can tell from the title, I will be watching the Barbie inspo movies. These are two of me and my sister's Barbies, which actually were originally my aunt's Barbies, which means they're probably from the 60s or maybe the 70s. And I would like to point out that the fact that their hands are completely chewed off was nothing to do with me and my sister. We received them that way. I don't think we called these two Barbie because we had other Barbies that were called Barbie and other names starting with B. But yes, sadly in the great clear out of my parents' house, the Barbies had to go and I only really had room to keep these two, which I thought I should keep perhaps as family heirlooms. I don't know anyone who isn't excited for the Barbie movie, including these two right here. They're super excited. Cannot wait to see it. I was even talking about it with my friend today and she was telling me her boyfriend has already planned out his pink outfit that he's going to wear to the cinema. But before the actual movie comes out, I figured I should do my homework and watch the Barbie inspo movies. Apparently, someone found Margot Robbie's Letterboxd account, since deleted of course, and on it was a list of 5 films called Watch for Barbie. I thought it would be a really fun thing to watch these in preparation for the film. These films include 2 French films, The Young Girls of Rochefort and The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which I'm probably pronouncing wrong. It also includes the movie Splash with Tom Hanks, and Puberty Blues, which is an Australian film, and The Truman Show. I have seen 2 of these before. I've seen The Young Girls of Rochefort and The Truman Show. I probably won't be watching The Young Girls of Rochefort again. It's an incredibly visually spectacular film, and so I think we can safely assume that the visual aspect of this film is the inspiration for Barbie. It was so colourful, the costumes were incredible. It's a French musical, and so all the musical numbers are so vibrant and so entertaining to watch. However, I did find the plot very strange, a little bit confusing, and I'm pretty sure murder happens in it if I remember correctly, and it's done in a very strange way. I have also seen The Truman Show before, but that was a very long time ago and I did really enjoy it, so I might watch that one again. The 3 main ones I want to watch that I haven't seen before though are The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, which is another French musical by the same director as the other one. So I am assuming it will be pretty similar, very colourful, very entertaining, maybe a bit weird. Splash is obviously a film I've heard about because it's directed by Ron Howard, interestingly. It has Tom Hanks in it and it's about him falling in love with a mermaid. I don't recall it getting the best reviews, so I will be interested to see what aspect of this film has inspired Barbie. And then Puberty Blues is an interesting one. I wonder if Margot Robbie added it in there for the Australian connection. It's directed by Bruce Beresford, one of the most famous Australian directors. And Puberty Blues is a very classic Australian novel. I have not read the novel, but I have seen the newer TV series that was adapted from the book. That came out in 2012 and featured a lot of very good Australian actors. It was a pretty big deal when it came out. I thought it was a pretty good show, but it's quite full on because the whole story is about these young teenage girls in the 70s who are obsessed with surfers and about the way that the male surfers completely ignore them in regards to surfing ability and only really want them around for sex. And the way that these girls get treated is absolutely horrendous, but I'm told very accurate to the way Australia was in the 70s. It also contains a lot of very colourful slang words, including lots of people calling each other moles, which is not a word that has continued in use in Australia. So yeah, all of these films are amazingly available on streaming services, which is so rare. So I'm very excited to get into it and watch these films. I do love the Australian connection that we're getting purely because of Margot Robbie being the one playing Barbie. I think there's something kind of poetic in the fact that a blonde Queensland Australian is playing Barbie, because I guess when I was growing up as a kid, although I knew that Barbie was American, it was pretty easy to picture Barbie as being Australian as well because of that cliche blonde tanned white Australian look that's kind of been prevalent for a long time. Currently, right now, the Sydney Barbie press tour is happening, and there is something so strange to me about the fact that Greta Gerwig is in a Sydney Westfield. To have her at something that seems so mundane as a Westfield shopping centre and going on The Project, which is like a panel news show here in Australia, it just seems so odd to me. but I'm kind of loving it at the same time. I am, of course, also loving all of Margot Robbie's outfits. As she said in the interview on the project, she is fully leaning into the Barbie aesthetic and it suits her so well, and we're just getting some quite amazing riffs and takes on the iconic Barbie looks. I have already been op shopping looking for pink items that I can wear to the premiere screening that I will be going to, and I have no doubt that the op shops are going to be filled with people doing the same thing, finding pink clothes to wear to the screenings. I went today and I already did see so many perfect outfits. There was this incredible hot pink jumpsuit with like velvet letters all over it. Unfortunately, my color in pink just doesn't suit me that well. At least hot pink certainly does not. This pink shirt is more of a peach color and is literally the only pink thing that I own. But I loved many Barbie-esque outfits there, hopefully for other people to find and enjoy. All right, that's enough of me talking. Let's get into watching the actual films. Forgot I own this dress, which is technically more of a peach color, I suppose, than a true Barbie pink, but I think this is more than satisfactory for Barbie purposes. I'm not normally a square neck kind of person. I just feel like it doesn't really suit me that well, and you can't wear normal bras with these kinds of dresses because the strap shows. So this is actually the only one I own, which I bought and then subsequently forgot in my cupboard. However, I do understand the appeal because I am feeling very Jane Austen, and I kind of just had to do my hair up because it felt weird leaving it out wearing a dress of this cut, which makes no sense. Actually, that's something I should look up. Is there a Jane Austen Barbie? I don't think there is technically a Jane Austen Barbie, but there are definitely dolls available that you can buy that are of a Regency era. Jane Austen Barbie though, that would be my Barbie of choice. So I have watched all of the films on the Barbie inspo list. There have been subsequently some other films mentioned by Margot throughout this press tour. The Red Shoes, for example, and is actually a film that I would like to watch at some point, but I am being a stickler in this video for the original Letterboxd list. So the first film I watched from the list was Splash. This is actually Tom Hanks's first starring role, the role that made him properly famous. He works at like a fruit and vegetable shop that seems to be a family-run business. He runs it with his brother, played by John Candy. However, Tom Hanks is not very happy. His girlfriend has just broken up with him, and he's at a friend's wedding and he's lamenting the fact that he can't seem to stay in a relationship with anyone, even though that's all he really wants. As a result of his misery, he gets very drunk. He decides to go to Cape Cod, where his family used to spend holidays when they were younger. He ends up falling into the ocean and is rescued by a mermaid. He doesn't realize she's a mermaid though, because when she's on land, her fishtail turns into legs. He's of course completely enamored by her, especially as she, out of the blue, just decides to make out with him. They get in a relationship, and the film is mainly about her figuring out the human world and him very much in love with her, but she refuses to say exactly where she's from and what her background is, and so difficulties arise because of that. I have to say I found a lot of this film quite boring because of course the poor old mermaid is not given much of a character. She's a bit of a male fantasy. She's this beautiful, amazing, full-grown woman with the personality of a child, and he starts going on about how he's found the love of his life when they literally do nothing but make out with each other, which I guess if that's what makes him happy, then fair enough. This film is such a classic 80s film in that So many parts made me laugh out loud. There are so many funny lines. There are some really great performances. The parts where she as the mermaid is figuring out the human world are quite fun. And I find a lot of these famous 80s films are like this, where I think the reason they become so famous and iconic is because people remember those particular parts and perhaps don't necessarily remember the film as a whole. Because as a whole, it's a bit dull, it's too long. I will say the ending kind of redeemed it, only in the fact that it's really weird and leaves so many more questions than it answers in a way. A thing I learned from this film is that the name Madison was only popularized because of this film. People did not have the first name Madison before the film Splash. She gets called Madison because they're walking along New York and they happen to be on Madison Avenue or street or whatever it is, and she decides spur of the moment that that will be her name. And that's kind of astonishing considering the name Madison is pretty popular, at least it is in Australia, and for a film to just fully create a first name like that is pretty impressive. But yeah, a very weird film. Only one that I'm glad I watched because it's just one of those famous 80s films that I'm glad I've ticked off the list. In terms of how it relates to Barbie, possibly it's because we know that Dua Lipa plays a mermaid, so that might be the inspiration. Perhaps there's something relating to the side plot where members of the government want to lock Madison up and do tests on her. That could be something in Barbie as well, maybe. Next, I watched Puberty Blues, which is a very classic Australian film. I think I mentioned before I've already seen at least the first series of a more recent TV series version, and I definitely preferred the TV version over this film. I think it's mainly just because it's an 80s Australian film and they often come across as quite clunky. It's very weird to think that people used to talk like this and act like this all the time. The sort of feminist aspects of the story, which is mainly about how teenage girls are incredibly vulnerable. They often idolize the popular girls and want to be with the popular boys. But in this particular situation, that desire led to actual sexual assault and completely disregarding their own wants and desires in favor of whatever the men in the group wanted. That's definitely in this film, but I think it's a little bit more understated than in the TV version, and I believe the book is much more overt with those themes. I think the film can't help but want to be really light and frothy because of its setting, because of it being set over a very hot summer at the beach in Sydney. Everyone is incredibly tanned and mostly very blonde, and I think the film struggles to get away from the glamour of that image to really delve into the dark sort of underbelly of this world. A huge part of the story is that the men are the only ones who are allowed to surf, apparently. The women just have to sit on the beach and watch them. I felt like that was only really addressed quite towards the end of the film, whereas that was much more prominent throughout the TV series as well. I'm guessing the visuals of this film are a really strong influence for Barbie. Obviously, the beach setting is going to be a big part of Barbie, but I do love that Margot's included an Australian film. It really links to Margot herself being Australian and the classic image of Barbie also being the classic image of white Australia. I do imagine that the feminist themes in this story are also probably going to be quite a big influence on the film as well. In regards to Puberty Blues, I would definitely recommend the TV series over this film. The acting was definitely a bit hit and miss, and it very much felt like a series of events and scenes rather than a real cohesive narrative. I personally do enjoy watching classic Australian films. It really is fascinating to see the way people acted and talked and dressed. Next, I watched The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, and I unfortunately did not like this one. This is definitely my least favorite of the list. I mentioned before I watched The Young Girls of Rochefort by the same director, which was also on the list, a very colorful French musical, and although I did find that film very weird, I also found it a lot of fun. It's obviously visually stunning and you can see it's a very clear visual influence for Barbie, but that film was much more of a traditional musical where there were musical numbers, lots of dancing as well, because it had Gene Kelly in it, who is of course the best classic Hollywood dancer. Unfortunately, this film, The Umbrellas of Cherbourg, is a completely sung-through musical. I am not necessarily the biggest fan of even the best sung-through musicals, but usually the best sung-through musicals at least have some banger songs. Les Mis is a classic example where everything is sung through, but there are these moments where people are singing a proper song and they're great. The songs are really great in Les Mis. I personally enjoy them a lot. This film had no standout songs at all. It's like they were just talking normally, but it happened to be in tune with the music that was playing in the background. I found it so weird, I found it so boring, and I just found it really painful to listen to. I also found the story really boring. It's this love story between a young woman played by Catherine Deneuve. She works in an umbrella shop and her boyfriend works as a mechanic. Her mom doesn't really want her to marry him, and then he gets sent off to the Algerian War, which I had to look up exactly how France was involved in that war, but that was like a massive war that happened with them trying to keep the country that they'd colonized throughout the like 50s and 60s, I think it was. So bizarre to learn that piece of French history. Anyway, he goes off to war, so she can't marry him anyway. To be honest, I did stop paying attention. Visually, of course, it is really stunning. The costumes are incredible, and Catherine Deneuve really does look like a Barbie doll in this. She has the brightest of blonde hair and the pinkest of clothes, but aesthetics are just not enough for me to enjoy a film, unfortunately. And for me, the point of a musical is to listen to some fun songs and to watch some really fun dance numbers, and there was absolutely no dancing in this, no choreography at all, which was very disappointing considering I thought that was the best bit of the Young Girls of Rochefort. So yes, I sadly would not recommend this film. I gave it like 1.5 stars on Letterboxd, and honestly the half star was only because the visuals were immaculate. So especially because I did not enjoy that film, I decided I would rewatch The Truman Show. I haven't seen this film for probably like 10 years. I think the last time I watched it was when my sister was in high school because she was studying it for English. It's such an interestingly constructed film because for the first hour, you are entirely within Truman's world. You get to see little glimpses of the outside world, so you are given clues to what's going on if you didn't already know the premise of The Truman Show. But I think the extent of it is really left a bit of a mystery, and you're fully in his head, seeing him slowly become more aware and come to this realization that everything is not normal, he's not living a normal life, and how crazy everyone else around him makes him feel because they're just completely gaslighting him. But also, what's happening to him is so insane that he obviously is doubting himself. Even though all the signs point to him being correct, it still seems like a crazier thing than just believing that life is normal and believing in all the sort of excuses that the people around him give. And then at the 1 hour mark, you're suddenly given all the background of The Truman Show, all the perspective of the people who are making The Truman Show, and the satire is so fun in that moment. It's such a contrast to this beautiful, pristine 50s mixed with 90s world that we've been watching up until then. And it's of course so heartbreaking and so interesting to view now, having gone through decades of reality TV dominating the TV and then now social media being its own version of reality TV. It is still a fascinating film. It still holds up so well. The director, Peter Weir, is also Australian. I read that behind the scenes he changed a lot from the original script, which is much darker, and I think that works so well because it is visually so light and fluffy that the sort of horror behind what has actually happened and the fact that people just let it happen has much more of an impact, I think. If you have not watched The Truman Show in a while or haven't ever watched it, I would recommend seeking it out. And in terms of its connection to Barbie, I think what we can see from the trailer is that Barbie goes through a similar Truman realization that the supposedly perfect world that she's living in is not quite reality. That was a lot of fun. Even though some of the films were pretty mediocre, I still enjoyed that a lot, and it has helped me get through the last week of having to wait for Barbie to come out. I am going to be seeing it next Monday. I'm so excited. I will be seeing Oppenheimer the next day, which I am of course also very excited to see. Not quite as excited as Barbie, I have to say, but I have very much been enjoying the memes of these two blockbusters of the summer, despite the fact that it's winter where I live. Let me know if you've seen any of those films. Let me know when you're seeing Barbie. There are so many like Barbie opening night parties happening in cinemas near me, and I know they're already sold out. Although Barbie is obviously based on some very famous IP, it is just so fun to see a film that's not part of a major franchise be so big and have people so excited for it before it's even come out, and one that feels like it's going to be so joyful and so fun. Thank you so much for watching. Goodbye.